And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to GeekWatch, a subsidiary of the monastery, the open bar of the internet, the world's greatest shit show, and the place where we, the good brothers and sisters of this most holy of temples, seek enlightenment through the drunkest, craziest, and most batshit ways possible. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4 good brothers. We have the king of memes and the weather inappropriate Jack Frost of the temple, good brother Akira. We have the man with fresh new duds and is still laughing at his former cowboys, good brother Cure. We have the living stack of comics and the unblinking eye of Sauron in the temple, good brother Doku, who is miraculously early and straight this week. And last but certainly not least, we have the man of 1,000 runes and the CEO of Zadara Enterprises, good brother Xanatrix. How the fuck we doing tonight?
Fucking wonderful.
It's a good night. It's always a good night at the GeekWatch.
So, with this particular little experiment, we're going to be doing something a little bit similar and different. As has been advertised, this is a world building episode. However, we're doing things a little off kilter this time around, and that is because of the approach that we have. See. We've all seen a shonen anime, at least one form or another, in our lives. And given how shonen relies very heavily on certain tropes, as does a lot of popular fiction, but arguably even more so with shonen anime, I figured, hey, why don't we try and make our own? And thus this is the result of that particular line of discussion. We're going to be creating a magic-themed shonen anime that doesn't exist.
And my assessment is that no matter how cracked this might get, at least none of us can be as bad as Reki Kawahara.
Don't worry, Reki. Your time will come.
The day of reckoning will be upon thee.
And I will make sure that you get your customary last meal beforehand. Because come on, we're not barbarians here. But let me. I think I'm gonna have to do this. I believe I'd have to do this as browser. Actually, not as browser, as window capture. Because it won't do for everybody else to not see the map that has been created. And once again, I'm using Asgar's map generator. This time, it's not going to be as an image because we're going to be doing it in real time. Since there's going to be some details that just looking at the image won't exactly cover. So. First off, let me make sure everybody sees the right screen. And I see Ethereal in the chat. Welcome to the party. Well, unfortunately, I don't have the budget to do a whole lot of art, Ethereal. So that's going to be a fill in the blanks kind of thing. However, there's still plenty of material to delve into. So let me move this to the back. And take that away. So you guys can now so everybody watching can now see it. And so on the top, when it comes to the topic of doing a magic themed shonen, now I will admit part of the reason I went with magic themed for this particular thing is one, fantasy, especially whether it be high, low, dark, sword and sorcery, grimdark, what have you, is a very easy one to kind of jump in because everybody kind of knows the motifs in one form or another. Some of us know more of them than others, mostly because we don't know when to stop reading. And yes, I am including myself in that. But I think the first thing that we need to establish is what style of fantasy should we be going with first off. When I had this in mind, I was thinking a very high fantasy approach. Not high fantasy in terms of the Tolkien melting pot, but high fantasy more in terms of the kind of high fantasy that you'd see, I don't know, Sanderson, right, or the kind that you'd see in certain anime. I'm not going to go with Konosuba in this case, Ethereal, because Konosuba is a comedy. But
some examples of high fantasy anime that I could think of outside of Black Clover would be things like Maho Sensei Negima, where magic is basically just given away to people and there's a school for it.
mm-hmm.
Although that one is a little bit more of a harem comedy than a shonen anime.
Fairy Tail.
Fairy Tail is definitely high fantasy. Everybody has it. I guess you could also count Seven Deadly Sins under that as well. Then,
yep.
And then if we go with if we go with things that are a bit closer to the assumed Tolkien melting pot, there are probably some other things that we could really find and find out.
Slayers.
Slayers is nothing like the Tolkien melting pot, but okay, yes, Slayers.
No, I was referencing that before. I was trying to say that we want to avoid the Tolkien melting pots, which is I know somebody might say, what about Record of Lodoss War? Record of Lodoss War leans more in the mythic leans more in the realm of mythic fantasy than anything else.
Yeah. Lodoss War is an epic unto itself.
Yeah. Which is why, for the purposes of this, it's kind of disqualified. I will admit the mythicness applies more so with the first anime more so than the second one. You know, the one that got a full 26 episodes. I was tempted to bring up the 12 Kingdoms, but not really. I'd say the 12 Kingdoms has more in common with a wuxia.
Yeah, 12 Kingdoms is much more Eastern. But even then, wuxia can still be. I mean, like if it were shansha with the immortal cultivation, you could still technically consider it high fantasy.
Yeah. Plus, but even with that, the 12 Kingdoms is a little too low magic for what we're shooting for.
Oh, I've got a perfect one because none of us is looking the right. We're all looking to the east.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the few things that I've agreed with Mother's Basement on, few things. Avatar is an anime.
Yes, it is.
So, and benders are everywhere. It's a way of life. That's high fantasy at that point. Dragon, I think I could see Dragon Prince.
I haven't seen Dragon Prince, so I can't comment on that. Should I?
It's actually pretty good. The 3D's composited pretty well. I'd give it a shot.
Yeah. I have an iffy relationship with quote unquote 3D anime. Largely because of the fact that I've had to suffer through some bad examples just like the rest of you have, including one from 4 years ago that we don't talk about.
if we want to go with a high fantasy mecha anime done by...
Nice save, man. Nice save. Because there was one other that you could have brought in, but I know that you didn't because you didn't want to piss me off.
Because it's not my wheelhouse, it's somebody else's wheelhouse to bring up magical girls and giant robots.
Hey, I'm right here.
That's my point, Cure!
Mr. No saying, what about DB, DBZ, and Dragon Ball Super? No.
That's not fantasy.
That's definitely more wuxia and martial arts. Well, I mean, technically at that point, it's martial arts of...
Yeah, although that brings a question that I'll have to ask you that I'll have to debate into sometime down the line. Does Dragon Ball from Z onward count as a wuxia or chansha?
They can come back from death. They can wish themselves to be more powerful if they want to. And they have the ability to wipe out entire planets if they need to. They're not just using normal martial arts anymore like they were for most of Dragon Ball.
Mm-hmm.
Z onward is definitely at that point a Shansha or a Xuanhuan, which is a mixing of East and West in the ideas of Wuxia, Shansha, Xuanhuan.
Mm-hmm.
And I would lean actually more towards it being a prototypical Xuanhuan, because there's a lot of Eastern influence because it was originally influenced by Journey to the West, but then there's a lot of Western influence from lasers. Lots of lasers. Lots and lots of lasers.
Ethereal in the chat is saying bending is not magic. You want to go down that route because just because of the fact that you're not using magic words doesn't mean that it doesn't qualify.
Bending has no explanation for its source. They literally say, I just copied the movements of these animals and then I could do what they were doing. They copied the moves of the badger moles for earthbending. They copied the moves of dragons for firebending. They copied the moves of the flying yak for airbending. And then they copied the fucking moon for waterbending. And you have the lion turtles who can energy bend, and it all allegedly comes from the spirit realm but doesn't. Bending's magic. It has no real explanation. Bending is fucking magic.
I feel like I'm coming back to that argument that somebody had with me a while back when I adapted Edward Elric to Anima and I made him a warlock class.
It's the same. Yes, it's the same argument all over again. I would definitely agree.
And for the record, I do have to clarify: a warlock in Anima is not the same as a warlock in D&D.
Sorry for breaking in, brothers, but there's some news I have to share.
Make it quick.
A certain composer. Guys heard of John Tesh, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. He just joined Parlor as of right now. So you know what that means, right?
What?
Tank Ball!
Tank Ball!
Couldn't stop myself.
Well,
Continue,
that's one beer
brothers.
down. That's one beer down for the night. On to number 2.
Okay.
Well, that's all. That is all, brothers. Carry on.
I'm breaking out the scotch for this one. That deserves a drink. I'm dead.
Well, that
Rails?
happens.
What happened to the rails? We don't have rails anymore. What in the hell? What in the hell?
GeekWatch, we always go out of control.
This is further than we've ever gone before.
Yeah. Anyway, so given all that and given the talk of magic, let's start with trying to nail down a. Now, there are two things I think we need to nail down first. The first one is figuring out which would be the primary perspective place, because when you think of a lot of works, there's usually one country, one faction, or what have you that ends up being the a significant focus. And I think we need to settle down on one that is the case for this. Like you look at say Valkyria Chronicles, and Gallia is the perspective in that case.
So we have two ways we could go about this then. We could choose to focus on a larger country. Look at it from a wider socio-demographic perspective, and then focus down to our hero. Or it could be a much smaller country that he works his way out of, but the country that he's in is still the focus until he breaks out into whatever the next season is, sort of thing.
I'm going to lean towards option B in this case, because that allows us to take more notes from the hero's journey.
And that makes sense. I propose Beowar only because it's close to Beowulf, and well, if we want epic fantasy, Beowulf was.
Okay, let's zoom down into that area.
Tiny. It's in the middle of a bunch of other more important sounding countries. A theocracy, a grand duchy, and then of course Mizik, which is just bigger.
You mean
Okay.
like real life Belgium?
I guess real life Belgium could be one good way to say it. I was thinking more along the lines of how Amestris originally was in Brotherhood amongst all 5 of those other countries, being that tiny circle in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just a little bit of parity there between the two.
We do like drawing parallels here in the watch. So we'll start off with this. Now, this is where the other part comes in. We need to nail down our magic system first. And obviously, that is casting a very, very wide net. So we need to narrow down this net a little bit. When it comes to the magic system that we want to use, given the fact that we're doing a lot of motifs from the Shonen battle setup, we need to have some sort of setup that would allow for both the beam blasting varieties and the hand-to-hand and or weapon varieties of casters or their equivalent. I also, and to narrow things down a little bit further, I am proposing that we use an element-based setup, but we are not using the Hellenistic elements. Instead,
What circle of elements should we use?
how about we use as our thematic basis the I Ching?
Really? Really? Really?
I had a feeling somebody was going to toss out a mind, body, and spirit proposition.
Okay,
The I Ching
let's make
the I Ching is way more than that.
let's
It's the
make this a little bit easier. Let's go with the Bagua.
Okay, because the I Ching is 64 hexagrams. The Bagua. I was actually about to suggest the Wuji, the Tai Chi, the Bagua, and everything else, and you're like the I Ching. I'm like, we're thinking the same things, but that's way too far.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, if I wanted to do a full on runic setup, I might go with that, but that's not going to work for this yet.
I actually no. Here's my proposal on that. The 8 main elements, the actual bagua, are what people are classified under. But by combining elements into the 64 hexagrams of I Ching, they can achieve more subtle effects, or they can engrave it on stuff so that it's a combination elemental magic with some runic elements.
All right. Now we're getting somewhere with this. So now I'm considering having it that the Bagua format is given how when you just look at the at its wiki page, you can see a bunch of equivalents with it, whether it be nature, element, Greek god equivalent, Greek titan equivalent, virtues and sin, and so on. What I am considering in this is that it's kind of the Bagua is the standard, but there are variations of it throughout the world.
Well, two things, Mildra. Regarding the magic system, is magic learned? Is it inherited, or are we using both?
I'm gonna go with an approach of it is if at some nascent imagine magic as a type of muscle. Everyone has it, but there are certain types that are but there are certain types and subtypes that are inherited. And
Okay.
Developing them involves putting them to use, whether that be through the way you build up muscle, as if you were training, or by expanding one's knowledge through study. Each of these are different paths to the same result.
So to use a very recent seasonal example, Jujutsu Kaisen, everybody can use cursed energy because everybody produces it. You can learn to use that cursed energy for curse arts. But there are specific curse arts that are talent only born unto you by birth. And if you don't have those, you can never use them because they're very specific to that one person.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
Second thing, Mildra, just because we have to have a reason to laugh at the map generator, I would like you to read the name of the county in the Mizrine Empire you were just scrolling over. It was the county, it was at the bottom.
I had it. Let's see, Mizrine Empire.
That's to the east of where we were just looking. Beowar.
I think he means Mizir.
Oh, Mizir. Sorry, I couldn't read it.
When you said Empire, that threw me off.
Oh, I thought it. I see.
Which tiny county are we looking at here?
It was named Shat.
I am trying to find it.
I'm trying to look for it now. I just noticed it at the bottom. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Shat County.
I want to take this time to remind all of you that I did not plan any of this map.
And this map is completely 100% randomly generated, which is why we have a glorious country in the top right we haven't pointed out yet.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we'll get to that one.
Man, they could practice Chinese black magic.
Fuck you. just fuck you, man. So, taking that into account, we have a, and I'm going to be doing a. Let me move this a bit. So I'm going to write out each. Now, for some of you, this is going to be obvious, but I'm going to write down in the council the eight trigrams with Bagua, specifically their I think I'll go with their natures.
And now we're just becoming Zeorhymer.
The other question: Are we giving a hero to each particular country? Is it limited to one? Could it be multiple?
Well, go. I'd say we will go with we'll go with a small group for starts, but before we even get to that, we need to handle the
basis for everything. Our magic system.
Yep.
Everything else that goes with it.
Mm-hmm. So now, obviously, this is a simplification, but here's the 8. So, and some of these we might have to retitle simply so that it'll fit our approach. So we have heaven, lake, fire, thunder, wind, water, mountain, and ground. So I can see each of these being their own spheres, each of them having respectively each of them having a kind of core rune, but with variations therein. Let's get the obvious one out of the way. What would be the dominion of the of heaven in this case?
So, unlike what many people might think when you say heaven, a lot of the time in the Bagua, it's meant to be like the stars in the sky, the celestial realm,
Mm-hmm.
which is why another way it's said is firmament.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the sky, and almost exclusively the sky as thought of as a celestial realm, not literally a heaven that is, for example, where people go after they die or where gods preside, but it's the heavens when you look up at the sky.
Yeah. So with that in mind, there are two. Would it be fair to go with the idea that the heaven end of this would be largely based in metaphysics and predictionism?
So you're saying more of a divination type area?
Yes.
If we're going with the Bagua, that would more likely be related to water, because water is all about the reflection and divination of both self and the world. The firmament, the heavens, while not actually where gods preside, are still in most cases where the immortals go and possibly live in their sky palaces. So
Law.
in this case, I would think heaven is power on a wide scale. Something, I mean, we can't just say AoEs, because everything is going to have AoEs at some point. But
I was
why?
thinking laws.
Yes, widespread hegemony. That would be a great way to put it.
So I'd say someone who is a expert with heaven understands how the rules of the universe are supposed to work at some level, and understands how to bend or even break those rules.
Though not without consequence.
Mm-hmm. And because it's basically that that heaven would be on the notion of the understanding, manipulation, and control of natural or supernatural laws. So I'd say it could also be used by exorcists.
I can see that. I can definitely see that.
Next is lake, and since we do have water as one of our elements, we need to go with something slightly different.
This one.
Go ahead. I didn't know if you added some Discord issue or not.
No, I'm I'm muting myself every time I go to eat my dinner.
Ah.
I like to say that with Lake, it might be best to look at his Bashyun, Zhongli-chan, and take a look at this person, one of the 8 immortals,
mm-hmm.
and how he lived his life was one of rituals and alchemy in the tradition of concocting immortal essences and pills, as seen in a lot of Shansha novels. And he was also somewhat of a merrymaker. Well, holy merrymaker, which is technically a matchmaker in heaven.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a little bit of the whole life of the party plus somewhat, but not like extremely energetic. It's more at the center of the party.
The composer.
The composer concocts things along those lines. And if we're going to assign this to a magic, I still think that the probably the best would be composition, creating things of some sort.
Yeah, that's what I wrote. What a lake adept would probably be able to do is, well, there's the obvious part that they'd understand how to utilize alchemy. But I'd say another factor is understanding how to create something from parts, whether that be when it comes to people. And I don't mean in some human centipede things, but what would happen if they would have an understanding of, say, what would happen if you bring these two people into the same area together, or in some cases, what would happen if you combined energies in the world around them.
Yeah, so they would know a lot about how building and building and weaving things together.
Mm-hmm.
A lot about and that extends not only to, as you said, the most basic thing of alchemy, to natural. They would be able to work together with a heaven adept to know what happens if I stack these supernatural laws in this fashion. they'd have an almost innate understanding of what the potential outcomes might be.
Yeah.
And then, of course, they can also do so within interpersonal relationships between countries, even. And so these would be like we're talking now at the highest level of understanding of the lake aspect. These guys are good at knowing what the outcome of any particular construction, whatever it might be, is, and so they're going to be good at diplomacy. But you're also probably going to have a lot of lake people who are artisans or other types of creative
artisans, engineers,
composers, literal composers,
yeah.
as in.
That seems very equally interesting. But what about some of the others, like the water element? How would they get?
One
How would they?
one at a time. One at a time. You have to keep in mind that I'm using the Bagua as a base, but that doesn't mean that we're sticking to it. We've already rechristened Heaven as laws and Lake as composition.
and
I don't think this would be right for me. I think I better get going.
okay, Kier.
All right. Moving on. The third one that we have is fire, or rather, Heart of Fire. And we could go with the we could go with the obvious of these are the pyromaniacs, but that's too easy. and also would be wrong.
Right.
Now, I'd say that would it be accurate to go with the idea that fire in all its forms is energy. Energy towards actions, energy towards destruction, literal energy, but always some sort of energy that changes things.
You might as well call that chakra at this point.
Well, again, we're not directly pulling from all of these other things and saying that. Now, I could see fire as energy, and I like the quip about chakra because that's pretty good. And again, looking at other aspects of how the Bagua interacts in Chinese mythology in general, you could definitely say that a person who has that sort of li, the actual trigram, is a person whose actions eventually shape everything in their lives. The Bashan Ludongbing that they actually point out was a guy who was striving to be a good person, enlightenment from the Tao, and but had flaws. And so, in this end, I would say more than anything, as energy, it's more. We have laws, we have construction. I think this one would be more. The word I'm looking for. Hold on. Synonym I'm specifically looking for. Momentum. The ability to move in a direction. The pushing forward.
All right, that I can definitely I can definitely see, considering how a fire will always want to expand.
Hmm.
Um, and of course, I know that Akira made the joke about chakra, but I'm skimming past that because chakra is a whole other can of worms. I know what you were going for with that, but I hear that and I immediately think of chakra in terms of, well, Hindu, and
Fair
like
enough.
like I said, I don't think I don't think we're fully prepared to dive into that can of worms just yet. So,
I
given
mean, enough. There are enough chakra in the Hindu that you could put on all 8 bakwa and the center wuji.
so fire, so I'm rechristening fire as momentum. You suppose that'd work?
Yeah,
All right.
like I said, it's not just energy. It's a drive to move towards something.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's move towards safety and thus you're retreating, move towards a goal, move towards anything.
Yeah.
That momentum carries you forward.
Mm-hmm. Now, next is thunder, and when it when it comes to thunder, the now of course, given the D&D background, that could be I could make a joke about sonic weaponry, but given that the personality that's associated with thunder is the emperor or a general, would it be fair to say that um that thunder is force of personality, or effectively the ability to rule?
I think it goes beyond the ability to rule because it's not just an emperor or a general.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I actually look at the 8 immortals that are also associated with this to get a little bit of a more.
Yeah, in that case, it's Sao Guoju, and I know I mispronounced that.
We're all dirty white devils to them anyway. It doesn't matter. Well, you're not, but that's different.
Mm-hmm.
You're over in the U.S. You might as well be to them.
I'm everybody's dirty white devil. Phrasing.
But the whole thing about it is they not only have a force of personality that allows them to rule. You look here, you see that he attempts to make up for the failings by his other family members, including his brother. He gives up his position within the imperial court because of his brother's misconduct. And because of that, he gave up the ability to rule because his family, to him, was a source of great shame. In this respect, I would say it's more a causality. They respect cause and effect to the point that they can use cause and effect in a way that allows them to rule. Yes, but it's more they treat the forces within their life in a way that everything flows in a cycle.
Fate
Fate could work, yes. Definitely a good one. Also, looking at some of these Bushido equivalents for the Bagua are good. For Thunder here, it's honor.
Which I'm not entirely sure. I'm not entirely sure if it's one of those cases where I could see it apply, but at the same time it doesn't sit with me.
Yeah. So, but I would say that Thunder users or Thunder adepts would be good at manipulation of fate, of their own fate, and perhaps later as they grow more powerful, the fates of others.
Mm-hmm.
But it's always through direct actions. We see here that again with Tsakochu, that it's not a it's not like he affected his brother's position within the imperial court. He instead said, "No more. My brother is being an asshole, and I'm ashamed to be here, so I'm going to leave." And would
this particular rune be the domain, especially of fortune tellers? In that regard.
But these fortune tellers would be ones, instead of saying, "I see in your future this stuff happening," it would be, "Your future may hold this if you perform actions."
I would say they'd be more in the active predictionist instead of the passive predictionist. So fortune teller was a bad example to use, and oh god, we're dealing with this again. So sorry, had to clear up a bot problem.
Oops.
Yep. I saw that.
So yeah, when it comes so I'd say that they would manipulate. I'd actually say that given what we're going with, would Wanda Maximoff be an example of a Thunder adept?
The manipulation of probability.
Mm-hmm.
Wanda Maximoff would be the example of a Thunder adept who has probably also dipped into heaven and lake, because she can affect the world. Mm-hmm. A Thunder adept who just studies Thunder would be able to tell a person, these actions will lead to this outcome. These actions will lead to this outcome in your future specifically, not necessarily immediately. And then, of course, they would be able to affect the probability of their own actions very easily. Oh, my sword's going to miss? No, it's not.
Would it be more equivalent? Actually, I just realized what's it might be a better example. And I'm going to be referencing, of all things, Code Geass. Remember the Druid system?
Okay, the Druids. Oh God. Yes, I do remember the Druid system.
I wish I didn't.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is that a Thunder adept might fall into the trope of the chess master.
Yes. Yes, they might fall into the trope of Xanatos Gambits and the chess master.
Or Mobius if you're a fan of Legacy of Kain.
Fuck Mobius. Fuck him. I wish we had an ending to Defiance. That was better than the ending of Defiance. Dynamics, why did you have to die?
Although you would have had to find somebody who can do the Elder God's voice as well as Tony J.
We won't talk about that.
Yeah. Next, Wind.
Wind. You know, I realize that when it comes to, I think, literally every element thus far, we've kind of gone counter to what most people would assume, and I don't know if that's just because we're a bunch of contrarians, or because we think too much? It's probably both.
Yeah, probably both. Plus, if we went with just the standard element of an elemental approach, we would end up bottlenecking what potential encounters. At least that's how I see it.
And that's true. And actually, something I'd like to stress, because I don't think we stressed it really at all, for everybody watching, in the Hellenistic elements, you have complementary elements and you have opposing elements.
Mm-hmm.
But in the Bagua, there isn't really an opposing element to any other element. There isn't an element that directly counters or directly stops another element from working. All of the elements are part of a cycle. I mean, the original saying concerning the Bagua is from 0 comes 1, from 1 comes 2, from 2 comes 3, from 3 comes all things. Or was it from 0 to 1 to 2 to all things? Hold on. Mm-hmm. It's essentially a rundown. Yeah, it's okay. So it's from 0 comes 1, from the infinite, Uchi, comes the supreme, Taiji, which also people know as Tai Chi or as the yin yang symbol. From 1 comes 2, which is Long Yi, which is the splitting of yin and yang from the Tai Chi. And then from 2 comes 4, the 4 phases, which are the Xisheng, and those are expressed by the 8 trigrams. And then from 4 comes all things, which is the I Ching and everything else. The Bagua is an expression of how from nothing comes everything, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, the elements don't really counteract each other. They're all facets of how life works, and they work together, which is why you see, as we're continuing to go on, a lot of overlap. Places where you would say, well, wouldn't that be laws? Well, laws work in tandem with other things. Or wouldn't that be construction? Well, yes, but to construct things, you need other materials. So I'd really, really like to stress that with this system, what's happening is we're building a system where, yes, there are specific facets you can focus on, but each facet can come together with other facets to create something much bigger than the sum of its whole. It's a gestalt.
That was actually something that I had kind of backdoored in, is the assumption that there is not that a pure one element adept in this setting is impossible.
Yes,
you need any user is going to have at least 2 elements. Nobody is the rarest of people would have all of them, and when I say rare, I'm saying the equivalent of a Mistborn where you have somebody who has all 8 elements. Most people would have 2, maybe 3.
And the people who are in the highest echelons of society would likely have 4.
Mm-hmm.
Going above that, you're talking about heroes, legends, and myths.
Yeah, and even with that, the focus is not the focus on the combination is the same level of focus of the combination of, say, Nen users in Hunter x Hunter.
Yeah,
like it's less about what particular elements they're using and more of how that combined whole comes into play. To use an example, I'll go with the character whose arc I enjoyed the most during the run of the of the more recent anime. And that is Killua.
Hmm.
Um, he is a transmutation type, but being a transmutation type doesn't tell you enough about his approach, and it also doesn't tell you anything about the fact that one, he's a speed demon, and two, he has some ties to lightning. Oh, and taking, but getting back to the matter at hand, when it comes to wind, now Dragon had said something like the winds of change and the ability to sense things.
That's very typical.
Yeah, I would say. First off, I do think we need to nail down what wind particularly ties to when it comes to the Bagua.
And from here, the actual my practice of looking at immortals doesn't really help in this one. The
No.
immortal associated with wind is very she doesn't have a lot of detail to her, which is slightly indicative of the fact that China is still an extremely in this case actually misogynistic society. Yeah, I'm using a buzzword, but this buzzword actually applies here.
Yeah.
Um
Well, maybe the associated personality of wisdom might help.
just wisdom, but it's specifically wisdom in if you look at the actual Daoyin article, it's wisdom in the pursuit of Dao. Specifically with the exercises used to cultivate Jing and Qi. And so what it does is it creates, it says here, it makes the mind flexible so that there's harmony between body and mind and the Tao. As to how that could translate, that type of wisdom, it's balance. It's a balance between things. And how we could translate that into something more widespread, you may have a better idea than I do there, Monk.
When it comes to that, I'd say a lot of healing magics would be under this purview. I do like using the idea of balance as the main approach. I'd say a lot of wind adepts, or in this case, we'll be rechristening wind as balance or equilibrium.
Equilibrium's a much better word for it. Yeah, bringing things back to equilibrium is a great way to put it.
Somebody who uses this, I would say this is the other motif that is used very much by people who would be healers or exorcists. In the case of healers, they would be adept at restoring the body to its natural state. That does, however, but even that has limits. It would take, for example, a healer who's using this type of magic isn't going to be able to regrow a limb.
They would likely need the help of both a heavenly adept and a lake adept for that.
Could they reattach a limb? Possibly, but not grow a new one. and in the same vein, I would say that they would also be they would all you could also use equilibrium to do things like banishment, i.e., it would anybody who this is where somebody would learn turn undead or its equivalent. You know, the idea of attacking the rebuking this thing that doesn't belong in the area that it is.
In that respect, I would imagine that many wind adepts are used to keep livestock safe.
Both livestock, I could see one I could see one direct using it to directly harm a demon or any or a similar type of outsider.
Yep. There are a lot of uses for the wind adepts here. Which is another thing I think that is really good about the system we're going with. Everybody has so much utility that they all have a place in society.
Yeah. Now next is water. Which
we've already been going far beyond the original meanings of these things already.
Yeah.
So
no water bending this time. When I looked at the immortal associated with water, Li Teguai, it's a, it's an exercise in he's an exercise in contrasts.
yeah,
And he shows up as a beggar who fights for the needy, yet he's irascible and ill-tempered.
I mean that's probably because his apprentice burned his body before he returned from heaven.
Oh yeah, but given that, now first off, when it comes to that element itself, how would you go? What do you usually see with it? So I have my guesses, but I want to see where you're going to go first.
Well, as I said earlier, when we were talking about heaven not being about prediction and divination, and how water was usually seen that in Eastern, that's one use. But if we're going to go by the Bashanan personality for this particular entry and see how it goes, this is going to be rather than the momentum from Lee, this is going to be more the literally, almost literally things about travel. So, because Lee Takeaway, as you said, he travels around, defends bakers, but he's also constantly pissed off about stuff. It's a facet that deals with being where you need to be when you need to be there, being in the right place in the right time. So I would, rather than divination, as was the intimation earlier, it's more almost directly luck, but like a luck manipulated in such a way that you're always in the right place at the right time to do the right thing. You just have to determine what that right thing is.
Or not even the right thing, just a thing. And the funny thing is, when I'd read through his bio, the rechristening I was gonna go at one point was Justice.
I could see that justice taking you from place to place to defend, but that would, I think, if that was the only facet we were going on with here, it might bottleneck it. Like justice itself as a concept is very widespread, but justice as shown here is justice for only a very specific narrow thing. Could justice take you from place to place to do the things you need to do? Certainly.
Mm-hmm. But I do think, given that a lot of times there's a there two things that end up being conflated with each other are fate and luck, and I think a line between the two would need to be drawn.
Fate acts upon the person. Luck is something the person uses.
I can go with that. Next is mountain.
You'll notice that for the personality type, it says warrior hero.
Mm-hmm.
Warrior hero is literally wuxia.
I could make this the the element of war, but that would bottleneck it.
Well, and looking at everything here, while the personality is wuxia, the guy who is the immortal, Xiangguo,
Mm-hmm.
he is he was an occultist hermit who used necromancy. Thought he was the reincarnation of the Grand Minister for one of the mythical emperors of China. Is the guy who made the wine for the rest of the 8 immortals.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, he's probably the same drunkard that Jackie Chan's character from well, everybody knows that movie, was based off of. His kung fu was even the basis for drunken boxing. I think in this, you could almost say that his ideals are fluidity. Ability to adapt to all forms and to all situations. Because, fluid can take the form of a gas, and when fluid is a fluid, it can take the form of just about everything it flows through.
Yep. I do think adaptation would be a proper word to rechristen mountain in this case.
Yes. Adaptation.
Mm-hmm.
Very much so.
And now there's two ways I could see it. This could be for someone who is able to be very cunning, and if we want to go with the more direct route, good old shape-shifting.
I think it applies to it all.
Mm-hmm.
It could be a focus on both the mental aspects of being adaptive and the physical aspects.
Yeah. The last one is ground.
And this is one that gets kind of weird. Because first of all, Len Saihe
Mm-hmm.
is a chosen name from their time as an immortal, because parts of their stuff say their name was originally Yongsu. It's really hard to nail down this particular immortal. especially considering that they somehow became immortal, perhaps in various different fashions, like getting so drunk they threw away all earthly possessions, or getting drunk and flying up on a crane, helping a beggar, and that happens to be Litegua, and gave immortality, or Sun Wukong gave them immortality. There's so much. But this immortal, more than any other immortal, represents the duality of life: old and young, male and female, rich and poor, honored and humble, etc., etc. So in this case, I would definitely go along with part of the personality type being feeling things. Possibly the duality between reality and the imaginary. Not necessarily fantasy, but sort of the ability to see reality, see fantasy, or see the imaginary, and bridge between the two.
Perception.
Yeah, that could work.
I'd say an adept of perception could. The obvious end would be someone who's able to create illusions. I'd say someone who's really good at it could probably create pocket worlds. But it would also be the domain of people like bards and storytellers.
To perceive the mood of the people and help them to see a better world, maybe.
Mm-hmm. But that, and given the 8 that we have, which each of them comes across more like a philosophy than anything else. But that's by design, because it's going to be less about, because once again the approach here is just knowing what ones of the 8 someone is adept in isn't going to tell you as much as how they're going to actually use it.
Yeah, if someone says, "Well, I am an adept of the laws," oh, they're an adept of the laws. But then if they use those laws to do things like make it so no one can escape from a certain area by making it so that all of the laws are locked in place,
Right.
That they're a little bit more about controlling the laws for their own advantage. And
yeah.
So how they execute what they're doing versus what they can execute is going to be the indicator of the person.
And even with that, I'd say that they'd only be able to control some laws. And taking that into account, let's do a little bit of an experiment. And just so, first off, there's the instead of going with elements, we'll go with pillars.
That's fantastic. The pillars, I like that.
I will give you as a bit of an experiment on this. I will give you 2 pillars, and I want you guys to come up with an approach for how those two pillars would translate into someone's foundation, let's say. i.e., the pillars are the elements, and the foundation is the combined whole that they utilize.
Okay. I volunteer to go last because I've been dominating this conversation much.
Yeah. Akira, let's go with adaptation and momentum.
Adaptation and momentum. Yeah, I think Zan should have gone first. I need a little bit more time to think about this.
Doku, you want to go?
Same pillars or new one?
Yeah, like let's go. Yeah, let's go with adaptation and momentum in this case.
Adaptation and momentum. So, I think the foundation for that type of user would be focused largely around someone who travels a lot, good at survival, kind of very, maybe not the fanciest thing in the world, maybe not the most impressive, but just very basic, gets the job done. Like, you're not going to be doing anything crazy with it, but very practical, very versatile, very down to earth type of individual would use that. And again, traveling a lot.
Yeah. Now, in terms of the, would it be fair of me to say that they're the kind of person who would be a master of tool use?
Yeah, tools, repairs, again, just kind of a well-grounded, somewhat charismatic, but still level-headed individual, good at, again, perfectly fine working in a group, perfectly fine going alone, able to essentially do everything that they need to do just to get the job done. They're your cornerstone.
All right.
So support role.
Akira, I'll go with something a little bit different in this case. Perception and laws.
Think this guy's perception is pretty much on the basis of how you say normal philosophy, like might makes right or something similar to that, but still also has a bit of a lawful side to him, I believe. Yeah, this is tougher than I thought.
To be fair, this is your first time with this particular kind of experiment.
Yeah.
Yeah, trust me, Akira. I'm thrown for a little bit of a loop as well. This is outside of my wheelhouse, so you're not alone, dude.
So, Akira, a suggestion. Out of those two that you've been given, perception and laws, which is his fundamental basis? Which one was he born to?
I want to say he was born more on the perceptive type.
Okay, so he perceives something within the world. That is his specialty. What his central pillar is.
Yeah,
and then the things that he is perceiving has to do with the laws of the world.
right.
All right. Okay. Well, there you go. A little bit of guidance for you. Run forward with it.
Thank you. It's like, how should I put this? It's once again he's receiving as though again that might makes right, but also has a bit of another side where things might not be as black and white as he puts it. So, in other words, it'll be more on the line. It'll be more on the lines of he perceived this personality in his younger years, but as he got older, he starts to realize that things aren't really as what he perceived to be back in the day. Is that right? I think it is.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm gonna go with that one.
This isn't a kind of question where there's a right or wrong answer.
Okay.
And I don't mean that in a everybody's a winner kind of way. I mean there would be no metric to determine what would be wrong in this.
Okay.
Now for me, I'm get one approach that I could see is I'll go with oh, we lost Doku. I'll go with perception and luck. This would be I would say that they would primarily lean towards towards perception. This is somebody who would always have the right right kind of story to tell someone. A master orator. The kind of person who you'd expect to give the Picard speech.
Or in your case, the Cisco speech.
Cisco doesn't have speeches; he just punches.
My point exactly.
Although that could count as a story. Here's a story about the sound of one hand clapping. But that's what definitely comes to mind with that. With that approach, when it comes now, getting back to now that we have the basis of the system, largely based in runes and people's natural abilities. You already have a little bit of a cast. You have somebody who's good with stories, somebody who's good at support, and somebody who's going to be the jack of all trades. Now,
forgot me.
Okay.
Give me 2 pillars. I want to do this.
I am breaking out the die roller, and I'm going to roll D8 twice. I rolled a 6 and a 2.
So composition and luck.
Yes.
All right. All right. Okay. I'm gonna draw some. I already know how this is gonna go. Her primary is composition. And that's because she's always composing the best things for where her luck can fill in. She is history's greatest gambler, and she has yet to lose a game.
Lestia Ludenberg, is that you?
No, it's Shiro. Without Sora. Or maybe combined with Sora. It's Kuhaku, damn it.
Actually, I just realized who would be an even better example when it comes to that. Akagi Shigeru.
Oh, okay.
Am I wrong?
We agree. We agree. It's just a female version of Akagi Shigeru.
Yeah.
But still,
Akagi
the point remains: history's strongest gambler.
Yeah, can't really dispute that. Now, getting back to the matter of Beor War. Sorry. Let's see. I just one of the burgs that I found is Kizdush. Now it's Danduk. I just realized that ended up generating it. So it is a port town that has a castle that is walled and has a big marketplace and a shanty town.
That sounds like a country into itself.
Mm-hmm. And let's. Oh, apparently I can link it with the medieval fantasy city generator. Let's see what we end up getting. Well then. Welcome to the city of Danduk. We have the garden to the west, then the castle, then Castle Ward with then the port, then New Water, the Middle Gate, Bright Hook, and the park, and some farmlands outside of that.
Like I said, a country in and of itself.
Wonder what we'd get if we opened the heraldry generator. Okay, a purple crown on yellow and white.
That looks tacky as hell.
Does it randomly generate every time, or is it going to be the same?
Same.
It's going to be the same. Wow.
Um,
Well, not only they're a port country unto themselves, essentially.
Yep. Let's see. Apparently it has the first Toluk regiment. Regiment was formed in 849 Belcrid era during the Kizian Crusade. First regiment is stationed in Talthe. Regiment composition is 673 archers, 214 cavalry, 21 artillery, and 742 infantry.
I think they need a little bit more cavalry.
Just a little bit.
It's probably only light cavalry anyway, if it can travel with the rest of them.
Let's see. Then the First Fleet. Regiment was formed in 854 Belcrid era during the Kizian Crusade. First Fleet is based in Talthe. Regiment composition as of 1055 BE. Fleet 10. 10 ships.
Much navy, such power. Wow.
Okay. Then to the south is Narazga, which once again is a port town that has a castle, is walled, and has a trade center and a shanty town. Let's see what they look like. Oh, that's a much bigger place.
They did have 10,000 more people.
Yep.
Trollport and Redport.
Yeah.
That seems a bit racist.
I wonder if it's one of those cases where every once in a while dockers get in fights from both ports.
Nunsport down in the south there.
Yep. Shadowport, we don't talk about.
We don't talk about Shadowport.
Chicken Road, Asharch.
Talk
Then
Fairy.
then the castle, Nuns Port.
4
and-
songs.
Yep, and Eastgate. I love random generation.
It's the best. What's their heraldry?
Let's find out.
Quarterly Argentin Purpur, a Tiger Passant Sable. That actually looks kind of good.
Yeah, that looks better.
Yeah.
Plus, having it
fact that
split in 2 colors like that makes my Docker joke all the funnier. You could have one that likes to wear white armbands and one that likes to wear purple armbands.
And then, of course, the guys in Shadowport all wear black,
Mm-hmm.
along with Nunsport. Makes me think there's something going on between those 2 ports.
Yep. Then there's Nulbamunds.
Tiny.
Because-
It has nothing.
Yeah. Let's take a look at what its city looks like. That's not a city.
That is a country town.
Well, I mean, it's only 6,000 people, so...
Yeah. Then we have Nuragarg. Although first
Has a castle. Why does Noblemunds have 6,000 people and no castle, but Nurgar's has 2? That just looks bad.
Yeah.
That just looked way bad.
All right, let's take a look at what Nuragarg looks like.
Nurgarog.
Nurgarog.
Oh, it's a provincial lord's town. This is like where a provincial lord would live to protect the interests of the full kingdom.
Yeah.
Or maybe that's where the villain lives, since he named that little part Light End.
Then we have, although first, let's see what the heraldry for Nuragarg.
Nurgarog.
Wow. Some provincial lord this guy is.
Must be a pirate town or something.
He's a constructionist with a focus in equilibrium.
I guess. Then we have Kibahorg, which has a population of 7.7 thousand. Let's see what its map looks like. Old Kibahorg and Light Court. This is and a lot of farm. This is a tiny old place. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a case of it was a tiny town and then somebody struck oil.
I'd like to point out that both Kibahorg and the other one to the south, Nobleman's, have no castle, but Nurgarog has a castle, and it's tinier than both.
Although it's interesting that one of the kingdoms to the north, in this case, I believe that is
Shacominsian theocracy.
Yep, has a little colony right to the south of the Tonluk state. But Ronemond, wow, that's tiny.
Wait, do you see what does the bishop symbol mean? It has
It's a religious center.
Well, of course it is. It's part of a theocracy.
Mm-hmm. Let's take a look at what they. Wow. And let's see what their heraldry looks like. Oh,
I've seen better.
I think the banner looks better than the shield.
The shield looks kind of meh, but the banner's pretty good. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. This is the place where I could see this as being a very quiet, out in the sticks kind of country.
Mm-hmm.
Basic a lot of farm and a lot of port trade, because it's all but 2 of their major towns apparently Beowar is a republic, and they are surrounded by Mizir, which is an empire. The Grand Duchy of Keys, and the Shakaminsian theocracy. Given that it's a republic, would you say that what sort of republic do you suppose Beowar would be, given its neighbors?
What type of republic? One that is very concerned about being eaten by any of its neighbors.
I get the or
I'm being a little bit tongue-in-cheek with that description.
yeah, but I'd imagine that that most of its business is in the ports.
Yeah, I'd also imagine that it's only recently a republic.
Mm-hmm. Or what do you think? Do you think it broke off from one of its neighbors?
It looks that way, especially since it still has a piece of the Shakaminsian theocracy in it. Mm-hmm. I could see it coming off of either the Empire of Mizir or the Grand Duchy.
Yeah. Now, when it comes to the Grand Duchy of Keys, so apparently the first Dull Dutch regiment was formed in 1028 BE, and is stationed in Duldrich.
And it was during the Bear Warrior War.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Bear. So I guess it's a case where a Bear War did fight for their independence.
Especially considering their army's bigger and better, and they have a better fleet of ships. They have 10 versus the 1 that the Grand Duchy has. I'm imagining that this might have been a military coup. Like half the military and most of the navy was just like, yeah, we're gone, bye.
Let's see. Their regiment composition is 525 archers, 110 cavalry, 488 infantry, and 11 artillery.
Yeah, we got the lion's share of everything. Bear War for life.
So I get the feeling if we did do this as a shonen, if he ends up heading south, it'd be a case of probably not a good idea to announce where you came from.
Yeah, but he'd also look like everybody else since they broke off from the duchy.
Yeah. And let's see. The first fleet was formed in 1027 Belcrid era during the Bear-Warrior War. First fleet based in Talfeld. Fleet 1.
Damn.
We took all the other ships. Fuck y'all.
I mean, they've got a bit. I was gonna say they've got a better army, but that's not the case. They obviously don't. And let me see what the closest town is on the border. That would be Kararang, which has a decently sized population, but not much else. Let's see what their city looks like.
Beer well. They have a well with beer? What? Honey Place and Wide Bridge.
I wonder if this is the case, just like East City and Dragon Ball Z Abridged, where the town is so big because prostitution is legal.
I wouldn't be surprised.
But let me see what their heraldry looks like.
Not bad. We've seen better, but it's not bad.
A red antelope on
Gold
yellow,
and black.
Yeah, on gold and black. Certainly seen worse.
Yeah.
They only have like 2 cities.
Mm-hmm.
Karang and Solkon.
And the capital, and they do have the capital of Dull Dutch.
We never looked at the capital for Bear War.
Let's do that.
Probably because it's hidden underneath all the troop markings.
Well, the capital is Talhe.
Yep.
Which, that's a lot of people.
47,000, almost 48,000, and it's got a port, castle, walled town, market, is a religious area, and has a shanty town.
Let's see this. Holy Jesus.
Actual fuck. there's the Heath all the way down at the south there in tiny, tiny letters. I wonder if that's part of how much of Shantytown? What? Are you sure that there isn't more Shantytown than walled?
I am sure. There's a big fucking castle, and Talhe seems like the kind of town that would be that you would see in one of the Thief games because it never ends.
You're not fucking kidding.
Like this feels this. I feel like our protagonist would not be from Talthe. That would be a case of this is the big town.
I think he would come from Nurgarag, where the provincial lord is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But let's take a look at Dull Dutch.
Dull Dutch is only the size of fucking Danduk. Well,
Let's see.
like 4,000 people more.
See, it's a. Oh, I forgot to look at something when it came to Taltha.
The heraldry. Fucking bunnies.
Green bunnies on gold and purple.
It's on gold and purple. To remind you that we will fuck you up because we breed like rabbits.
The population's so high.
Exactly. Fucking exactly.
Whereas Dull Dutch, that's the most standard looking town that we've seen.
Mostly
It is. It's also fucking tiny.
Jeez, the Grand Duchy really did get fucked by the war. Let's see, and they haven't.
Wait,
they
Are
haven't.
these all earldoms when they're a duchy?
And I get the feeling that it was a section of earldoms that decided to break off and just become a republic.
Fuck you, Duke. You haven't been doing shit for us.
Especially
gonna
look at the size of the Dull Dutch earldom.
Fuck you, Dulditch. We're gonna take our toys and go. And we did. And
Yeah.
you tried to fight us, and you lost.
Yeah.
I bet we got some military help from Mizir.
Yeah.
I'm sure the theocracy probably didn't get involved.
Yep. Apparently there was a historical battle, the Doliath battlefield, which took place November 5th, 890 Belcrid era. So that was that's an old ass battlefield.
During the Kizian invasion. But remember that our stuff was made during the Kizian Crusade.
Let's see. Let me see. Let me put military back in there. When you mentioned Kizian, so I do have to wonder if the Grand Duchy of Kiz tried to do a big ass crusade and got their ass kicked. Beowar was tired of the Beowars were tired of getting their asses kicked in a crusade that they didn't sign up for, and decided to
split off.
And Mizir is very much has the look of a country you don't want to fuck with, because
considering that part of it goes all the way down to the Principality of Froth.
Mm-hmm. So let's see. Well, I already mentioned the battlefield. They have multiple regiments all over the place.
Dare Regiment. And all of those regiments are huge. Huge. And they helped us in the Beowarian War. Look, they helped us. We got help from the fucking Empire when we're like, fuck this shit.
They got a decent fleet too. And well, here's the answer about what killed off the Duchy's fleet. The third fleet, which was formed in 935, and is composed of 8 ships, or at least 8. Or
It has 8 ships.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know how many it had then.
Yeah, probably had more, and it's a whole lot more than 1.
Naval battles.
Mm-hmm. At let's see what. Then we have the town of Theodrol is a copper mining town of 8,542 people.
A lot of copper.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people.
Yeah. The Shat Regiment.
The Caddoan War and the Shat Regiment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's see. Their composition is 2,500 plus archers, 700 plus cavalry, 61 artillery, and 2,600 infantry.
That's an army. That's just one of many armies in this entire fucking empire.
And the Shat Bridge, which is a stone bridge over the Gakero River. They have a fleet further north as well, which has 16 ships.
Is their capital Shat? Is that actually their capital? Please tell me that's not their capital. That's their capital.
Oh my god.
And it's tiny.
Yeah.
It's fucking tiny.
So let's see what kind of place the Emperor lives in.
It doesn't even have a castle. It doesn't even have a castle.
No, it does.
Oh,
It's in the upper ward.
It's a T. He T poses for dominance.
It's like a fucking toilet, bro.
Let me see their heraldry. Okay, not bad.
What? We gotta find one of their bigger towns just for the ridiculousness here.
Okay, that's not it. That might do it. Gadab with almost 20,000 people.
Wonder why it's named Gadab. That looks like a normal large city.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, not too bad.
Their I see that the port towns tend to be the most populous in this one. See, that has
Dongas.
No dongas. Even when you try to escape the penis jokes.
Okay, that's about what I'd expect a medieval town with a castle to look like.
Yep. Theodrol itself has a castle because it has a copper mine. Makes sense. You'd want knights there. Doesn't look like the mine is shown on the actual. The mine's probably not right. Oh, that's a fortress, not just a castle.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it looks like this empire full of Chads helped us tell the Kizians to fuck off. Pink leprosy? What?
Doesn't give details, and I'm guessing that's why the town of Kakarb is so small.
Victim of leprosy?
And the Sahatharbian. Go ahead.
Shatarbian fault.
Jeez, they probably have no luck in the Southern Empire. And I get the feeling the Grand Duchy probably tried to get the southern part of the empire to help, and they're like, "We got our own problems. Fuck off."
Possibly.
The town of Narik is in that area, which
Silver Arch with the East Ward and 6 mills. place is fucking. I love it, but
But
wow,
apparently even in that southern area, they still have a regiment.
probably because of Froth. Froth is right there, and they fought with them before in the past.
Oh, given that apparently one of Froth's regiments is right on the border, that
Look-
has
Down at the piece of Froth at the very southern tip of the Empire with 15 archers. No, 9 archers and 6 infantry.
that's not a regiment. That's a fucking militia.
It's not even a militia. That's like the remnants of a battle. Those guys are hiding in the Heart territory because the Principality doesn't want to cross Empire territory to get those deserters back.
Yet it's somehow part of the Grand Duchy of Roguia.
Wait, what?
Yes.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, it figures why they're there. The Grand Duchy doesn't want to go anywhere near there to fuck with both the Empire and the Principality just to get 15 deserters back. Although, look at the size of that army in the Grand Duchy there. 10,000 people.
Yep. Formed in
Jesus!
994 BE during the Langonian campaign. Composed of 5,655 archers, 437 cavalry, 4,541 infantry, and 235 artillery.
Oh man,
Whoa,
that's
shit.
fucked.
And just below that, they have a fleet of 78 ships.
Jesus! Versus the Principality of Froth's 1 ship.
Yeah, I don't want to deal with them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I almost want to, for even more lulz, I would almost want to move us into that tiny little blue thing right next to Roguia instead, because look at that tiny little blue thing right next to Roguia, that country. What is that called?
What, the one...
That one right there.
Stormer. Oh, the capital is called Stormer. The country is called Kadawia.
Kadawia.
Mm-hmm.
This actually might be a better place for our heroes to start in.
Yeah, with a close to a freshwater lake. Stormer is population 9820. Let's take a look at what it looks like.
Pretty normal.
Mm-hmm.
It's tiny, surrounded by a bunch of people with a lot more shit than them.
Oh yeah, I forgot. Let's look at their heraldry.
That's not bad.
No.
Lots of purple, which is weird, because purple is actually really rare in heraldry.
Let's see. And Kadawia is also a republic. With 3 big-ass nations surrounding it.
Yeah, the Ligonian Union, the Grand Duchy of Roguia, and again, the Empire of Mizir.
Mm-hmm. Although, what's this? Oh, it's just it's a lighthouse.
What's with that white patch right there? That doesn't even look like a country.
Probably because of the fact that it's in an area with a erupting volcano.
That might be the factor. You never know.
Which has a height of 9.1 thousand.
That's a tiny volcano.
Mm-hmm. Although it also apparently has hot springs towards the north.
This map is stopping. This map has stopped making sense a while ago.
Yeah, and don't you love it?
Oh, hey, we're going into your territory. So, everybody, do you want to see the monk's personal territory? The Blackian theocracy.
We're changing that right now.
But it's perfect! Don't mess with perfection!
Okay, one of you come up with a better name right now.
My name will just be sarcastic and outright worse. Go for it, Akira.
Strata? That's the best I can think of off the top of my head.
Oh,
In my mind, you'll always be the Blackian theocracy.
fuck off.
But Monk, it's your own it's your own personal theocracy. It's all yours.
I hate you so much.
There's Zuko.
Yeah, our internet went down, so I'm on mobile.
Oh, shit.
Shit.
Yeah, no, I tried several things. Even when I'm on mobile, I was having a lot of trouble connecting to the DNS servers. The Wi-Fi is still down, so I guess I'll chew through some data.
He changed the name of the Blackian theocracy, Doku.
No, what? That was the best one.
Oh, looks like we've got a fair amount of religions. And a lot of them are folk religions.
3 of them are heresy. But to which of the organized religions are they heretical?
Let's see, the Naborian sect, whose supreme deity is...
Dawatebon.
Yep, Dawatebon.
All 3 of them are.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I see why they're heresy. They're heresy against Rodanism, who is also... Rohandism, excuse me. Rohandism, whose supreme deity is also Dawatebon.
And so we had, although one thing I want to see
Is what the religion of Bear War is.
Mm-hmm.
It's that it's Vealism, which is a non-theism.
An organized non-theism. How does that work?
Well, it means they don't have any deities. That doesn't necessarily mean they don't have any spiritual belief. So they could have an organized set of spiritual beliefs that just have no deity.
Then we have the religions tree. So Vealism is rooted in the Jotun beliefs, which is a shamanistic belief system.
Which makes sense. Shamanism doesn't always have gods.
Let's take a look at the diplomacy.
White means neutral, but that's for the Kingdom of Chagwin. We need to look at the one for the Kingdom of Bear War.
All right.
Republic of Bear War.
Let's see, Republic of Beowar. Okay.
For the Empire of Miserian Empire, there's a suzerain of the Miserian Empire. The Miserian Empire really did help us. I was right.
Let's see. And when it comes to the Grand Duchy of Keys,
wait a minute. Hold on. We're the suzerain, or either I think Mizwar is the suzerain of us. So we're a nation. We're a nation controlled by Mizwar, but we have our own domestic sovereignty. We're a feudal. We pay fealty to the empire, and they let us continue to be Bear War. I was 110% right.
And when it comes to the theocracy, it looks...
Shakaminsian theocracy is an ally, as is the Grand Duchy of Keys.
I get the feeling it was a case of
ally or die.
Yeah.
I like how on here, even though you've edited the tag, it's still the Blackian theocracy and the diplomacy editor.
And apparently Beowar is enemies with that theocracy.
They're also enemies with the Hylian Empire. This is just the best.
I need to use this thing more often.
You do. This is fantastic.
Okay.
Wow, you can even change what units are used for distance and such.
Mm-hmm.
Cultures? Culture? What does it mean by cultures? Oh, ooh. Jotun culture is a generic culture. Huh.
I want Blackian culture.
Yeah, what culture is up in Blackia? Excuse me, the Strata theocracy.
Khazad-dûr has a name base in Dwarven.
Yeah.
Then we have Wildlands, Khazad-dûr. So would it be fair to say that the Beowarians are that a lot of the people in basically in a large chunk of this part of the continent are giants,
or at least descended therefrom.
Mm-hmm. And and one part of Eldar. There's giants and a few Eldar. Let's see, Dale.
Naval. And they're human.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, what were Eldar? Elves? Your hated elves?
Yep.
Yeah, they're your hated elves. I thought so. So then again, looking at the Strata theocracy, what are the people up there? More Dales? Yeah, Dales with a few others.
Yeah, Dales. We've got Dales. We have Coblins.
It's like goblins.
Let's see.
Yeah, they're goblins.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got that tiny light green Lorien, which is elven.
Yep, and we have Lurien, which is French.
And then more wildlands.
Mm-hmm.
And then... So, I know why the Strata theocracy is enemies with Beowar. We're taller than you. Your tallest people are elves, and you hate elves.
This
Oh wait, there's a tiny little bit of blue.
Drakes.
Dragons? What?
Yeah.
Yeah, dragons.
Yeah, way to the north. Apparently there is a.
There be dragons.
Mm-hmm.
So what you're telling me then is you hate us because we're taller.
Although when it comes to the biomes, this is where things get interesting because there's a whole lot of temperate rainforest in Mizir, and Beowar has taiga
and tundra. What the shit?
and a glacier right in the middle of the fucking country.
I love it. I bet we go there to pray.
Yeah, and
to our
some
non-gods.
wetlands. Yeah, and some wetlands to the south.
This is, like I said, this map has just devolved into nonsensicalness the more we look at it.
Although given that whole hero's journey, I think we'll
Magic.
stick with. Yep. I'd say when it comes to the military units, given how personalized the magic is, would it be fair to say that that military units have a bit more standardized approach to magic?
I think they would seek people of specific pillars for specific roles, and then they train them to use them in a specific fashion. And if they couldn't, they'd wash out of the military.
Mm-hmm. Given that, well, let's take Beowulf for instance. With that, how would they train their? What would they be looking for selection for archers?
I think archers would probably be, first and foremost, archers would be laws. So that their arrows would always make sure to fly true.
Mm-hmm.
They wouldn't curve or spin or anything like that. They'd make sure that the arrow follows the law perfectly. Probably the best archer would be one with laws, perception, and if they're going to be like a general or anybody up there, their third would likely be momentum.
All right. When it comes to cavalry,
momentum for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Equilibrium, because the horse and everything else, the horse and rider need to be one, and adaptation.
Yep. So
they look for those three facets,
mm-hmm.
and any various combination thereof.
Yep. Artillery probably has a whole lot of composition types.
Yep, I was going to say composition first and foremost. Likely perception, and then maybe luck, because artillery in this type of setting probably would not be very precise.
Well, it's not like artillery has been precise for the majority of the time artillery has been a thing.
Yep, it's only very recently that artillery has become much more precise.
Mm-hmm. And would you say that infantry? And when it comes to infantry, that's probably where there's a lot more variance.
I would see that the number one thing for infantry would be fate, but other than that, it'd probably be a grab bag. Mm-hmm. And the reason I say fate is because everybody talks about your luck on the battlefield, but on the battlefield, luck isn't what gets you through, because you've got way too many working parts. So fate, on the other hand, if you could influence the fate of yourself and your comrades, just that little bit, that would be where it is.
Yeah.
You know, getting your sword just into the armpit of the enemy when you really needed it, things like that.
Is this like the saying that there's no atheist in foxholes?
No, this is more like every strategy is good until the first blow of battle.
All right, that makes sense.
Yeah. You can strategize all you want, but once the first blow of battle hits, every strategy's blown.
So I'd say when it comes to the opening, given the notion of the hero's journey, let's take that into consideration and try and build some of the potential arcs that could happen in a first season. So let me just.
So we need the general steps of the monomyth.
Yeah, because I think we can do. Would you say that the hero's journey could be done in one season?
Well, I mean, the hero's journey itself is a cycle. Generally, a hero doesn't necessarily always just return, and that's the end of the story. That was definitely a thing back in the day, but we've seen hero's journey expand and expand and expand. I would say that with a season 1, you want to establish your world,
mm-hmm.
which we've done with the first half of this GeekWatch.
Mm-hmm.
And then you want to at least advance significantly, maybe along some of the major points, but not necessarily to the end of the myth, unless that was your entire goal from the beginning. If we're looking to make a typical shonen action anime, it's going to go for a few seasons.
Mm-hmm.
Go for a few seasons.
Yeah.
So I think at this point, what it would be is the first season would be the call to adventure, obviously.
Yes.
Um,
I do like the idea of him of having a protagonist who is in the area where that provincial lord was.
yeah.
That would be the perfect spot to have somebody who would be in a call to adventure kind of situation.
Mm-hmm. And then not all heroes' journeys necessarily have a refusal for that call. There are some heroes that are very eager for the journey.
Mm-hmm.
But that's something to decide at a smaller, more detailed level. Supernatural aid is usually the next big step. Something that comes in and helps him take the big steps. Whether that's discovery of a particular way to use one of the pillars that no one had ever thought of before, or maybe he determined that he can use 5 pillars all equally, and now he's somebody from legend, or he's at least learning that he can use all 5 of those pillars, or whatever it is. His supernatural aid is going to tie to the system. Maybe he's the discoverer of the 64 runes.
Yeah. How about this as a possibility? Given how there's the theme of somebody who gets to their position through ridiculous amounts of hard work. When it comes, like, we've got people like Midoriya and Tanjiro these days.
Mm-hmm.
We can use that as a foundation for a bit. So one possibility is that this is somebody who is not related to the provincial lord, but works. I'd say let's take a little bit of a nod from the Prince and the Pauper in the fact that the provincial lord's son and our protagonist, even though could pass for each other very. We could go with either they can pass for each other very easily, or they happen to grow up together.
I think in a provincial lord's area, especially one with that few people, it would make more sense that they grew up together.
Yeah.
Additionally, they probably were born under the same pillar.
Although, given the whole thing with pillars, one particular idea that I was considering, and I will admit, I'm taking a bit of a spin on Asta's problem in Black Clover, is the fact that when somebody would try and predict his fate, it would come up as a blank, or they just couldn't read it. Now, when it comes
Go ahead.
When it comes to like what their actions might cause, they could read that, but in terms of what they might end up becoming later in life, nobody could tell.
I mean, we can either ascribe that to no one knowing exactly how to look with which combination of pillars in on their fate. Because I would imagine that there would eventually be a way to see their fate no matter what.
Yeah.
Just you'd have to know the right combination of pillars to do so. And also, since they're in a provincial area with a small population, they may not have had enough adepts to do so in the first place.
That I can certainly go with, and given that Now, I'd say figuring out that mystery could be one thing that could spur them on. I'd say another possibility is I don't know, maybe we can go with the idea that Mizir might try and get a little bit more aggressive.
Against whom though is the real question. Bear War itself, because Bear War. I mean, Mizir's. Oh, looks like Doku lost net again.
Yeah, I think he ran out of minutes.
Probably. I think because Mizir is already the suzerain of Bear War. They have sovereignty over everything but the domestic relations of Bear War. They can tell Bear War, hey, we need your military to come help us here. Or, hey, we need you to declare war against this other people with us. Or it's anything like that. It's only under domestic leadership that they're like, yeah, do whatever. So if it's against Bear War themselves, it wouldn't really make much sense. Yeah. Especially considering how much army Mizir would have. Mizir would just be like, okay, so we're revoking your domestic sovereignty. And Bear War would just kind of have to go with it. So more aggressive in just expansionism, maybe?
Either that You could go with the distinct possibility that the duchy still has some sour grapes after getting their ass kicked.
Or maybe Mizir is just going to come over their armistices with Raguya and Froth and needs more bodies.
But either I'd say the thing that would be the call to adventure would be for one reason or another they decide as part of the deal, the provincial lord's son has to go through active conscription with Mizir. And
okay,
the protagonist in our case decides to go along.
That could work. That'd be a good one. And so that's the call to adventure. Getting in Mizir is going to be a little bit more world building, a little bit more discovery of what makes the protagonist special. It's not until he gets onto whatever battlefield that he's going to get into that we cross the first threshold.
I'd say given that along the path to the capital is
a historic battlefield.
Yeah, a historic battlefield in Doliath, that would be the perfect spot to do it.
Come across the remnant spirits of something with a grudge, or maybe. Or maybe an old Kezian who survived the war and is nursing his hatred, refining his art so that he can take revenge on the Bear Warriors and the Miziri. Something of that nature.
Yeah.
Something that forces the protagonist to use his newfound power in direct confrontation.
Now, obviously, given that they'd be starting at Nuragrag and have to go all the way, and if they're going up to the capital, they'd have to go. Would you say that they'd have to go to the capital, or would you say that they'd have to go to Garang?
I think it would be more likely that since this kid is only the kid of a provincial lord and not like, say, the prince, or well, not prince, but the son of the head of the republic, they wouldn't need to go all the way to visit the emperor. And that the only time that would become a concern is if someone witnessed what was going on the old Dolioth battlefield and said, "Holy shit! I just saw someone do something amazing." And the Emperor hears it through, his intelligence grapevine and goes, "Bring them to me." That could be season 2, though.
Yeah. I'd say that they'd probably end up joining becoming trainees for the second Missouri Regiment.
Yeah, and they'd probably join whatever their specialty is. I'm sure that the kid, the provincial lord's kid, would probably, since he is a provincial lord's kid, while both he and the protagonist were born under the same pillar, his subsequent supporting pillars, whatever they might be, would probably focus more on statecraft.
Insofar as
just since he's already being raised to be someone who's working with statecraft, that's how that goes.
Yeah.
So he would probably come into the army. He would probably be eventually show the necessary qualities for leadership and statecraft. And this is where the Lord's son and the protagonist would start having their paths diverge. I'm guessing that the protagonist would probably be conscripted as a grunt. He'd probably be infantry.
Yeah.
And Doku just proposed a very interesting idea in the council of perhaps turning the gifted hero trope on the head, having the villain curse the hero with all pillars and no way of controlling it. Interesting trope, or interesting inverted trope, I should say. But I'm not.
I think the problem with doing that is that having all 8 pillars in this case would make someone way too powerful.
Well, and that's the point Doku was coming with. He gets all 8 pillars, and because it's too powerful, he has no way of controlling it. So he needs to find a way to just get rid of his magic outright.
I don't think that, given the genre that we're working with, I don't think that would really work here.
Yeah, it's not like, it's interesting. It's a very interesting idea. I will give it that. But I don't think it suits a normal shonen battle anime.
And I know somebody might be tempted to make DBZ jokes, but
we've already gone over the fact that DBZ is way beyond shonen battle anime.
But taking that into account, you probably have. Now, given the fact that I will admit that I backdoored it so that the provincial lord's son and our protagonist having the relationship that they have. That's a easy backdoor to have the typical rivalry approach that you see a lot.
Yeah, but I almost think that it may not be necessary in this setting.
Probably. I'd actually say this would be one of those tropes that would be natural to invert. That they aren't rivals. They trust each other.
Extremely good friends, which is why one takes, like, when the job to go into the officer's corps comes to the Lord's son, he's like, "But what about you?" And the protagonist goes, "Dude, you're suited for that. You're born for that. Go for it. I can help the guys down here. Just make sure that you got my back." And that'd be their entire attitude about it. They have each other's backs.
And given the. Let me see what nations are further north. The Heralian Empire, and the Strata Theocracy. Because I'm thinking about how the fleet could be used, but wouldn't really work. That'd be a down the road kind of thing. Going into this particular spot, going into the regiment, is where you could easily slot in a tournament arc if you so needed to.
I mean, they are kind of the bread and butter, aren't they?
Although let's switch it up a little bit. Instead of a single elimination tournament, why don't we go with a round robin?
I was thinking actually not just making it a tournament, make it an overall set of different challenges, a gauntlet of,
All right.
of different ways of using your powers, and the person who accrues the most points out of all of the different competitions wins.
I'm guessing one of those competitions would be open combat. Others would be you'd probably have several that are designed to test particular pillars.
Yeah, and you'd also have both singular and group, so that you could have testing both teamwork and independent activities.
Yeah. So it'd probably be a good way to have other I don't want to put this have people potentially from the regiments to the northeast, northwest, and north and southeast come to this spot, or if need be, we can just keep it to the second regiment's area.
The second regiment's probably big enough just for that exercise. Each regiment that is probably 2,000 people or more, which is all of them in the Empire, I think, would have their own at the same time. Oh no, wait, they have one regiment that's a few regiments near north that are all under 2,000. Those ones would probably combine for theirs.
Yeah.
But at that point, you could have everybody working to have these particular teamwork.
Yeah. Now I'd say by the time that tournament begins, they've crossed past the known and into the unknown.
Yeah, the threshold was definitely the battlefield, and then into the army.
Yeah. How would you interpret the helper and mentor, the first helper and mentor, in the challenges and temptations part of it?
So the first helper is going to be the provincial lord's son. That's basically, he's there helping him the entire time from the beginning. And he's also going to be the one who says, the whole, when they're on the battlefield and the protagonist discovers whatever the true extent of his special power is, the Lord's son is going to be like, hey, that's really impressive. You did something nobody ever thought was possible, et cetera, et cetera. But that also means that something bad's going to happen if people start finding out.
Also,
so
no worries about having to nod off Akira. I know that this is a demanding topic.
And I hate that I always seem to centralize these ones. It makes me feel bad because I want the other guys to chime in too.
Yeah, no. It is what it is. I'm not going to cry over spilled milk.
I know. It's just, still, I like to involve the group. I'll put it that way. But yeah, the helper is definitely going to be the Lord's son, because he's a confidant. He's a best friend. He helps out the guy. Probably when they first get to the regiment, they're both seen and they're just going to accept the Lord's son. Lord's like, no. This guy's good too. And tells them to, just show them something impressive. And he does something impressive, and they're like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, we'll take you in as an infantry member. And that's when they have their little conversation about, well, but I want you with me. And the protagonist's like, dude, you've got this. They want you for the statecraft and the leadership. I can go in as a grunt. You got my back. Let's do this. And so the helper is definitely the best friend. The mentor is only going to be found once he's in the army, possibly just before whatever tournament arc you come up with. And the mentor's only going to become closer to this kid as he sees how he performs in this tournament.
Yeah. For some reason, when I try and visualize the mentor, I end up getting a fantasy version of Shadis. I don't know why.
Really?
I think I might be influenced by Attack on Titan Abridged, but I could easily see the mentor having a very drill sergeant attitude.
Yeah. I think that would be good to say, that he has a very drill sergeant attitude. Likely he's an old vet who has no further chance of advancing. But nobody in the infantry fucks with him either, because if they do, well, they end up with bruised ribs for the next week.
It's either a case where he either can't advance or he chooses not to. And
I think it'd be a combination. He didn't want to advance, and he offended the wrong people.
And nobody's going to try and push the matter because, again, bruised ribs.
Bruised ribs, and he's good at what he does, which is teaching people not to die. Y'all are gonna go out there, and some of you are even gonna fucking freeze like a deer in the just outside of the campfire. I'm here to teach you to stop being a deer and now be a tiger. Something along those lines.
I'm halfway between thinking of Patton and halfway thinking of Arlie Ermy.
Arlie Ermy every step of the way. I'm sorry. Do you think this is funny?
If I have not made it clear by this point, ladies and gentlemen, I have a very warped sense of humor. And hey there, pirate! Welcome to the party. You're right in the middle of us trying to make the arc for a shonen anime that doesn't exist. But given that I'm guessing the revelation / abyss phase of the hero's journey is where they get at least a little bit of a hint of why they have a weird ass setup for their powers that their friend doesn't.
I think that would be also the crest of season 1. I think that would be where season 1, he has to face down that tribulation, whatever tribulation leads to the revelation. And that's going to happen after the tournament arc as he deepens into his power, the challenges and temptations. I think the other temptations would be things like other parts of the army trying to recruit him once they see how good he's doing. The potential of the officers' corps recruiting him once they see the type of power he has. Things he'd have to face down to stay with his mentor and show the faith in his mentor that his mentor had in him. Stuff like that. I actually don't think very much that there might be a woman as the temptress in this case. There may be, but more likely, since these regiments are probably going to be completely meritocratic, there's probably going to be plenty of female soldiers there, because their pillar powers are just as good and just as powerful as the men's, and so it's not going to be the case of an all-man's army because of the magic being a great equalizer. And maybe he comes upon the tribulation that is to transform him, to give him that revelation. Maybe it has to do with a secret hidden in the Empire, or maybe it's the secret behind why the religion in the area has no gods. Who knows? There's a bunch of different things we have to work with there, socially, theocratically, whatever we want to look at.
I would say in this case, given that we're dealing with season 1 level stuff, the revelation should be focused more on him than on other people.
Yeah.
There's a few possibilities. One that I want to avoid is doing some sort of origin revelation, because we've seen that happen way too often, especially from bad writers.
Origin revelations are easy.
Mm-hmm. Or in some cases, focusing too much on a habit I see among a lot of bad writers and a lot of bad woke writers, though the wokeness is only a secondary factor in this, is too much emphasis on the origin of a character. Like, since we're talking about the hero's journey, may as well get out of the system. I'll bring up Rey as one of the examples, making this big mystery about her origins and why she's so good with the Force, and then doing the whole, oh, your parents were just slave traders, or the empty child trying to go with the notion that the Doctor is the reason why Gallifreyans can regenerate. Like those are examples of origin of relying too much on origin. If I want to use a less egregious example, I can go with all the origin revelations that they tried to do over the years with Donna Troy.
Yeah.
Or I would bring up the origin, the amount of times they tried to do these different origins that didn't stick with Power Girl, but they pivoted that into something that actually worked.
Yeah.
And with Final Crisis, where it was revealed that the reason all those different origins didn't stick is because, well, she doesn't belong here.
I remember that.
Like, Final Crisis had problems, but overall I liked it as a comic.
It was an enjoyable comic. That's true.
But given this, I'd say that at this point the simplest revelation that could be done is the fact that you can probably go that for the longest time it was thought that he only had 2 or 3 pillars, when in fact he has more than that.
Yeah, he had the fact is that he had pillars he didn't knew he had and was drawing on them intuitively.
Yeah. And I'd say a point of doing this sort of revelation is putting him in a situation where he ends up drawing on a pillar that he isn't known for having by accident.
And it's not like a small buffering force in his normal usage. It's this pillar needs to be used as the primary pillar for whatever he's trying to execute.
Mm-hmm.
Which would make sense.
Yeah.
You could actually fit that into the tournament arc. Say the semifinal or the finals.
Mm-hmm.
Of whatever, he's gotten all the points, and the points are used to put people in your traditional round robin tournament bracket. And so he's made it to semifinals or even the finals, and he's facing down this enemy where his normal stuff just does not work.
Yeah.
And so he has to think outside the box. He's like, well, maybe if I do it this way. And he's like, but that doesn't make sense. How can I do it that way? I just got to try it. And then he comes to a sort of epiphany, and the hints are there. You build it up throughout the series.
Yeah.
The hints are there of him subtly bolstering his main pillars with pillars that he doesn't know he has, with offhand comments like, "Huh, I never would have thought that kid was a perception pillar. It's almost like he's got such a grasp of the equilibrium of things."
Mm-hmm.
Just offhand small things, lampshade hanging because you need it.
Mm-hmm.
Chekhov's gun, even at some point, probably one offhand comment that is then what makes the primary callback. And then he uses that pillar, and he realizes that he's always had that pillar. He's like, how do I have this pillar? When did this pillar come to me?
Mhm.
But it doesn't matter because now he's one. And then you get the after you always get your catharsis at the end of the episode. His mentor comes up to him and says, "Boy, we've got a lot more to teach now." And so the gruff veteran then takes him aside. It's like, "All right, it sounds like, or it looks like the pillars you're using are way different than what we thought. So here's some more stuff."
Although he'd probably open up by grabbing him by the collar and saying, "You've got some explaining to do, kid."
Kid would look at him and go, "I don't know. I really don't know. What the hell?"
And I'd say learning one of those pillars. Not I'd say would you say that he'd at most have maybe 6 pillars potentially?
To keep him from, if we're going through a normal
Mhm.
shonen battle anime with more and more arcs,
Mm-hmm.
I would say that by the time he hit 5 pillars, which is already the realm of myth,
Mm-hmm.
he'd be involved in some of the Empire's larger struggles. And it's only once the southern region of the world, who are already allies with each other, has to go into the larger overall world conflict with the northern half, because it's those empires up there that seem to be enemies,
Mm-hmm.
that he would discover his 6th and final pillar. And that makes him another figure of myth, one of the heroes of the world that came from humble beginnings. And even then, each pillar he got would be successively, it would be a qualitative difference in how his power worked.
Mm-hmm.
It wouldn't necessarily be a quantitative power increase. Again, looking at Hunter x Hunter and Nen users don't necessarily get stronger in the normal power scale. They just think of different ways to use their power, which is
Mhm.
one of the reasons I love Hunter x Hunter. And so he would start thinking of new and ingenious ways to do the things he's always done using the new pillars he has access to. Eventually, he'd probably learn like 1 or 2 major upset type attacks that use all 6 pillars, but they'd also be insanely taxing, both for concentration as he focuses on weaving all these different pillar aspects
Mhm.
together, and physically taxing, for I imagine it would use a lot of whatever the source of magic is from him to do so.
As far as the source of magic, I would say that I would say that any form of magic that this setting has is tied in one form or another to someone's soul.
Okay.
Like I said, it's true. The reason why I use the muscle comparison is you can exert a muscle, but there's going to be consequences when you exert it. You can minimize the exertion with consistent practice, but you can't outright eliminate the catch.
And so I would say that him using a 6 pillar piece of magic, whether it's an attack or some sort of whatever the effect of that 6 pillar piece of magic is, would be like world-class weightlifters going for a world record weightlift.
Mm-hmm.
So they're using their entire body's worth of muscles for that sort of thing, and it's insanely exhausting in the end.
Yeah.
And he has to use both body and mind, because he has to like at that point he's got some of the things he's going to have to do 6 pillars. That's a lot of different things to think about, and you have to balance them, and you have to make sure that you don't tip in one way too far or another, or it's either not going to work or blow up in your face.
Yeah.
So it's an insane piece of work. It takes time. His friends would need to help him in order so that he could get it off. At that point, we're getting into all the wonderful normal shonen tropes of my friends will help me. I need time to charge up, but there's thought behind it.
Yeah. When it comes to now, that brings me to the concept of atonement when it comes to this.
Mm-hmm.
Now, given the approach that we had with revelation and transformation, how would atonement factor in?
Well, since we already avoided an origin revelation because it's easy, this is going to be him confronting whatever holds the ultimate power in his life, the center piece of the journey. So the focus here, since we've already had him starting to focus on himself, is going to be a coming to terms, most likely, with the price of failure. His atonement is maybe that he's been taking on too much. And he's become so much of a linchpin that he, to many people, is an irreplaceable figure, and it's increased the stress upon him immensely. And has also given him the whole if I fail here, everybody dies mentality, which is something a lot of heroes eventually get.
Taking that into account, the way I end up visualizing it is he is his friend, the Lord's son, decides to call him out and challenges him to a fight. And I'd say, and this would be a case where it would very much apply, because up until this point there is this notion of the idea that these two would come to blows with each other is so unheard of, and anybody would balk at the idea.
Mm-hmm. They've been friends and brothers and all but blood forever.
Yeah. But
I also like the idea that the provincial lord's place that he grows up in isn't an evil person. Like, people would make the normal lampshade assumption of that guy's going to be an antagonist later, and he never is. He's just a good-natured lord who raised this second kid alongside his own kid, treating them as if they're siblings because born under the same sign. The woman's maybe a servant in his household, and the man that was with her died. He didn't even run off. Like, it's not anything super tragic. It's just, oh yeah, your husband died in the line of battle. I'm really sorry about that. Well, you're a servant here in the house. Come in, we'll raise your kid with my kid. They can be friends. And he's just this really wholesome dude. So even he gets like a letter, like it's this big announcement of a duel between his son and his best friend, and he gets a letter and he's like, the hell, and gets to where they are as fast as possible.
Yeah, but the sole reason for doing this is the son clearly given his inclinations and his abilities, can clearly see what's going on and needs to step in.
Yeah, it's the best friend coming in, hitting you on top of the head. You don't need to carry everything by yourself, you idiot.
Yeah, which I'm pretty sure some would argue that's cliched, but here's something I want to make very clear about my philosophy. Do not fight the cliches because you cannot swim upriver. Lean into them and use them in ways that are yours instead.
Essentially, the trope exists, and you're going to run into a lot of tropes eventually.
Mm-hmm.
So, rather than using the trope in an tired, old, the same as everybody else fashion, take the trope, fashion it your own, use it in an interesting way. Tropes aren't TV tropes has an entire article. Tropes are not bad because they're tools, just as a cliche is a tool. It exists. The only way it's bad is if you write it bad.
I said a while back that getting mad at a trope is like getting mad at a bucket of paint.
Exactly.
And I'd say that's sort of it. When it comes to the fight between the two leads in this case, would this be, who would you have end up winning that fight, or would you have it be a draw?
In the end, the fight would likely go in the just because of how it's all set up at this point,
Mm-hmm.
it would go to the advantage of the protagonist because of the assumption that he's got to carry everything. It's all on his shoulders. He's got to do what's right. Because he's the only one who has this ability, the sense of responsibility weighing heavy
Mm-hmm.
upon him.
Yeah.
And as this is yet another cliche that actually works. As the fight is going in his favor, due to the scale of battle, something bad is actually going to happen to his best friend. Like he was just going to end the battle once he got him in a compromised position and told him, yield, this is the end of the battle, blah blah blah.
Mm-hmm.
But there's the typical, oh god, you caused structural damage to something around us, now it's going to fall on top of us. Or maybe you started a fire, now it's all around us. Or one of those things that will happen when you're at these levels of power. And it takes and he freezes because, oh my god, I can't get to him in time because he's so far away or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And other people, his mentor, the provincial lord who showed up to watch them fight, his entire unit that he's now in charge of, because that's what he's been doing as the hero of the war,
Mm-hmm.
they all, as spectators, use their own pillar powers to halt whatever is occurring. And then the provincial lord's son gets up with a smirk on his face, just with a smirk, dusts off his jacket, walks up to his best friend, pats him on the shoulder. You don't have to carry everything. Look what everybody else accomplished that you couldn't do.
See, that I'm perfectly willing to go with. I'd say after, and as far as a means of doing the return, you could probably have the Lord make an appearance, and this would probably be a case of the first time that either of them has seen their father figure since the early days of this season.
Yeah.
Who has a few words for both of them, probably reprimanding his son for taking a gambit that was so reckless. That was reckless. Hey, but it still worked, right?
I think with the way I've painted the father in my head, he'd come up to both of them, the sternest look on his face. He's a provincial lord,
Mm-hmm.
but it just before he can start talking, it cracks just that little bit, and he grabs them both and he pulls them together, and he's like, I cannot believe you both have been so profoundly stupid that you could have lost each other.
Mm-hmm.
And he's crying because it's dad.
Look,
He's crying because it's dad, okay?
Um, I'd say when it comes to doing the return, um, he probably would be reprimanded.
Hmm.
Um,
Especially for widespread damage caused in an unsanctioned duel.
yeah, I'd say that what the punishment would basically be put on on house arrest
Yep.
for a time. The son steps in and asks, well, if he's gonna be on house arrest, then why not have him why don't we just go home? I'll keep an eye on him throughout the whole time. Something to that extent. Basically a way to do a return, but with the backdoor of he's eventually this little vacation of his is gonna end and he's gonna come back.
It'd be like the end of season 3 or 4 at that point, considering how much power scaling we've gone through.
Yeah. Um, that would also be the perfect spot. I know you don't care for them, but that would be the perfect spot to actually put in a time skip.
So I don't like time skips for no reason.
I know why you don't like them, and I don't disagree. But I do think that if applied in the right way, a time skip can work.
Well, and yes, this time skip would make sense. He's being put on suspension from the Imperial Army because he broke so many military rules.
Mhm.
The commanding officer above him, which is what the Lord's son technically is, has decided that yeah, you're under house arrest, and the other commanding officers disagree with me here. I'll watch him, guys. We're gonna go back to Bear War to place him under arrest.
Mhm.
That entire journey doesn't even necessarily need to be seen, because it's going to be a pretty peaceful one unless there's an antagonist in the background who interrupts it. I hate that when that happens. I don't.
I
think it
had
needs
no
to happen.
intention of doing that.
I know. I had to mention it because I know that the assumption will be made from some people in some place that on the way back on this peaceful journey after we've just had this huge moment of crisis and catharsis, there's yet another moment of crisis. Why? We're at the end of this particular cycle of the monomyth. The catharsis has come. We're just going home now.
Hmm. And I'm sure as far as obviously even under house arrest, it's not like it would be a case of being idle. Um,
I'm sure he'd go around. He'd go around the town and he'd help people out, because I'm sure both him and the provincial lord did that before they went to the empire.
yeah. Um, probably help out. Probably give some help to the regiment in Toluk.
Yeah.
But eventually the cycle would repeat when open conflict is declared with I'd say either the Hyarlians or the Stratons.
Maybe an alliance between the two.
Mm-hmm. That'd be good enough. I'd say that either an alliance or the Stratons decide to move in on the Ligonians.
Yeah.
And that would be as good an excuse as any for a more active approach, and thus he gets called back. He ends up heading north to Ligonia, and that's how you get the next series.
Yep. War in the north.
Mm-hmm.
That could work. That could actually really work.
Yeah. Now, the reason the reason why I ended up going with this little experiment was to demonstrate how you can utilize the cliches that are so often present within let me just turn that off, within something like a shonen battle anime, and turn them in and use them as inspiration for new and interesting approaches.
And even then, as everybody saw, we took some very heavy cliches, some big ones that people are like, oh, that's so old and rote. But if you take them and you first of all make them your own, and second of all put them in at the right place for the right reason and at the right time, they will never feel cheap. You'll get the catharsis, the emotional blow that you were supposed to from them, rather than feeling that's okay, I get it, but that's kind of eh. You'll be like, oh yeah, and invested. That's the point of using any cliche or any trope in the right way. Is you're using the tool to get to invest and get that investment to your audience.
And when it within this particular approach, you've got, like I said, you've got all the high points, but also throughout this whole thing, there are some very obvious tropes that we've avoided, not because we wanted to do, not because of a overt reason, but simply out of a desire to show that if we don't need the trope, we're not going to use it.
Exactly.
The rival who's supposed to look like a bad guy but really isn't. It doesn't fit what we're doing here, so we didn't use it. The whole thing with powering up, we didn't use. I know some people might go with, but what about the whole naming of attacks? That is something I'd actually keep. And when it comes to naming attacks or stuff like that, which I'd say Tokusatsu gets picked on more than Shonen for this. But
because I have a name for every attack.
I have argued that particular motif has a longer history than people know about. Because my theory has always been that whole approach is rooted in kabuki.
Yeah, I can see that.
Especially since kabuki has a specific type of pose in a kabuki play called mie. That is pretty much a tell for the audience about what's coming next. Because people who would watch kabuki often know what's coming, but seeing it happen is the entertaining part.
Not to mention that a lot of kabuki plays are most people who go to kabuki plays have already watched maybe the kabuki play under another troupe before. I actually really enjoy kabuki myself.
I certainly find it more interesting than No. I don't have anything against No. It's just one grabs me more than the other.
I actually really like Rakugo Shinju.
Although hell, both of them are going to be easier to follow than going with that gag of Scar's real name. Which of course that whole thing is an infamous Rakugo, and Let's see. I believe it was Jugemu Goko no Shurike Kashish, and I can't even go through the full thing without fucking it up. Which I think is the joke.
That's part of the joke. The other part is, I mean, you're not a Rakugo actor,
No.
so kind of expected. We're both a little too Western for that.
We're also way out of practice for it, and it's basically what happened. Especially given that I think if I recall correctly, the story goes that a newborn was brought to a temple. The priest suggested several names that began with Jugemu. The father couldn't pick one, so he just went with all of them.
Yep, I'm pretty sure that was the story.
Yeah.
And I mean, even translated, that story is funny. It's the execution, though, that's really the funny part.
Yeah. I will give them credit for the fact that with the outtakes for FMA, they tried to do that joke in English, but it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Plus, I feel sorry for any voice actor who would have to try and read that, no matter what language.
Give me a few practice runs, and I could probably.
Well, obviously, this is the only way you get into Carnegie Hall. But I think one of the other things I can see going is that we kind of overlooked is the technology level, and I don't want to go. I don't like the idea of going full classical medieval when it comes to the technology level, especially with the use of magic.
Mm-hmm.
I would say it leans more in the realm of Magipunk, almost steampunk level of tech, just with magic instead of steam.
Okay, I can see that.
Because the approach with this sort of setting and the approach with Project Gaia as well is that magic and technology are one and the same. Magic is applied as a form of technology. Instead of magic being cordoned off and there's this thing that only a select few understand. Everybody knows about the pillars. It's just some people are better at some people know them better than others.
And that's how you get your carpenters and your architects and your pottery makers and all your musicians and your playwrights, and everybody has different ways of using their pillars for normal societal stuff as well as anything having to do with combat. It just so happens that the protagonist is particularly suited to combat. Maybe part of the whole reason the Lord had the two grow together so closely was might be good to have his son have a best friend who's also his bodyguard.
Yeah,
maybe.
I'd say that he probably didn't know how right he'd end up being. He just had a feeling that this was the right thing to do at the time.
Yeah.
Plus, by doing this sort of tech level, you can kind of go with, you can have a bit of a gag where they probably had thought, we're dealing on the first day. They thought, we're dealing with range training, and then they get these rifles, and they're like, wait, these aren't crossbows.
Yeah, the Empire probably has a little bit of a military tech advance compared to the provincial lord's office, who probably couldn't afford a steam rifle if he wanted to.
Yeah, I'd say it's less like steam rifles and more like the There is one magic item from the D20 Modern book that will always stick with me.
Which one's that?
It was referred to as the Crystal Pistol. The base idea is taking a crystal and putting in the framework of taking a crystal and putting it as the top end of a pistol frame. So instead of firing bullets, you're firing spells. It's just that it only knows one spell, and that's Magic Missile.
I see another one here actually on the modern D20 SRD under the FX items.
Yeah.
A psionic crystal pistol as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just the artwork of the thing was a bit of it. So it's not like they'd be using steam rifles. What probably happen is they were probably used to using traditional crossbows or crossbows where they'd have to first create the arrow with their own powers and then fire it.
Yeah.
Whereas
or whatever pillars they may have, maybe it was a team, the crossbow had a team of constructors who made the bolts, and then the people who were actually firing may have had a perception or a fate or something along the lines that would help them fire the bolts truer than usual.
Yeah, but the technology once they start going through training, cuts through the middleman where instead they have some sort of clip that they fill with their own energy, and that's how it fires.
Which would be an interesting way to put it.
Yeah. It's basically a case of storing energy in what's effectively clips that they can fire, but they have a finite amount. Once one's empty, you put it back in your storage, reload it, and keep going. You probably have the same principle when it comes to melee weapons as well, so you can have your equivalent to the old gunblade, because I just wanted an excuse to put a gunblade in a battle series.
I mean, they are visual spectacles.
And of course, there's plenty of other possible variations. Given the use of artillery, you probably have somebody using some form of gun lance. I wouldn't be surprised if cavalry use. Given that I just made a Monster Hunter comparison, I wouldn't be surprised if cavalry is using something akin to the charge blade.
Going full Monster Hunter, are we?
If we're gonna go ridiculous with some of this sort of tech, we may as well go full speed.
Yeah,
I'm just using that for example's sake.
I mean, if you want spectacle for spectacle's sake, I mean, Monster Hunter is a good place to start.
Well, the guy who would later do Fairy Tail did a Monster Hunter manga at one point, so why not?
Yep, that works. So, all right, I can see how they'd go from being country bumpkins to members of the Empire and going, whoa, look at all this cool stuff, and everybody else being, ha ha ha, those country bumpkins, until they realize the country bumpkins are beating their asses.
Yeah. But that now this I'd say this one got off to a bit of a slow start, but this worked just as well as a good chunk of the other world building experiments because, well, right place, right time.
Exactly.
But that is going to do it for this particular episode of Geek Watch that ended up going a bit longer than usual. As far as now, I do have unless something happens, I do have a set of interviews that I'm going to be doing that I'm going to be doing this week.
Awesome.
Fortunately, I don't have as many as I did last month. Tomorrow I'll be interviewing T.B. Phillips and talking about his particular project, which has is a bit of a historical fantasy gig. And let me see if I can get his card, because Avalon Awakens, which as well as the whole Dreamers of Avalon series. The best way for me to describe it: Viking pirates.
But that's already Vikings. They go a Viking.
Viking pirates and Viking pirates with elemental magic.
Okay.
I'm giving a bad summarization. I'm fully aware. Tuesday I will be interviewing the guy behind a little comic that I came across called The Whack Jobs, which is not meant to be taken seriously. Wednesday I'll be talking with Dr. Goo, the head of Gooey Cube, which is the module thing that I talked about on Friday with James E. Jackson. He got me in touch with the guy who's running the show. James was just somebody who's DMing the thing.
Cool.
And Friday, I'll be interviewing Jason Sperry, who's the editor for the Scales of War project. So, and as far as what's coming next week on GeekWatch, that is going to be all about Garo, Tokusatsu's Dark Horse. And yes, I did intentionally make a double pun with that name.
Of course you did.
After all the laughing that you did on the Blackians, you don't have a whole lot of room to talk, man.
Which are still the Blackians on everything but the one label you changed.
Yeah. And I know we didn't go into. I know there were a bunch of other countries that we didn't go into during this, but one, we're not doing the by the elements thing this time around, and two, when it comes to those other countries, those can either be later seasons or spin-offs.
Yeah, they may not be at all related to the primary protagonist we're talking about now.
Mm-hmm. Besides, I can use that as a backdoor to tell other stories. If I want to, and revisit this setting down the road.
It's a good setting. I think we got off to a good start.
I will note, however, that if I was to use this in a tabletop setting, I would probably need to use something a little bit more narrativist. I wouldn't be able to use something that already has a defined spell list.
So something more along the lines of maybe you could use Light Strikers for this.
Light Strikers could work. If I heavily hacked it, maybe I could use Against the Dark Masters setup, or maybe Fragged Kingdom. Actually, no, scratch Fragged Kingdom, because the way the downtime works with Fragged Kingdom wouldn't be compatible.
I know that when it comes to narrativists, there are certain ones you couldn't use, even though they are more narrativist. Anything from White Wolf, because the powers are closely tied to the type of narrative they're telling.
That and White Wolf doesn't really have a generic system for me to use.
Exactly. Like the closest thing I can think of that could come to this is Exalted, but Exalted is very tied into its identity.
Yeah.
You'd have to hack it to where it's basically not Exalted anymore.
Godbound could work.
Yeah.
be hesitant to use the low end of Godbound, but it's not a case where I'd say no to it.
Probably have to use the low end of Godbound just for like the normal civilians.
Yeah. The only D20 based setup I could see myself using is on the assumption that I use the Spheres of Power system. Because that is I'd say the Spheres of Power was tailor made for this kind of thing because it's concept based.
Yeah. But that's only if you want to use a D20 system.
Yeah. Savage Worlds, I'd have to do a whole lot of book jumping, but it's not impossible.
Yeah, but that's the same as the Rifts problem. Why do you want to do so much book jumping?
Mm-hmm.
And yes, I'm bringing up the cursed Rifts again.
Look, I would say Brian Fitzpatrick's Tattered Magics could work pretty well as well. I would have to do a little bit of hacking, but
not a lot.
Yeah, Inversion 20 is very old school in its design.
Mm-hmm.
And because of the fact that there isn't really a defined spell list with Tattered Magics, it can work very easily. In fact, that's one of the game's strengths, is the fact that it doesn't, so that people can just build on their concepts. As far as whether I'd use, I know there might be the temptation to use something like Fate. No. Fate is incompatible for other reasons. One of the big ones is how much of a stranglehold Fate has on stunts, which has always been the big problem that I've had with Fate is the fact that the amount of stunts that you can use is so small. Unless you want to give yourself less fate points to utilize, which I don't think would be a good idea.
No, it would not.
Mm-hmm. Saga and Cortex might work as well, though, because they're very concept based. Cypher wouldn't, though.
Yeah, Cypher system wouldn't really suit this.
Is the problem with now I know somebody might say, but Cypher has a pretty open class system. Not necessarily in this case. What it has is three. Instead of having one line like you'd see in a lot of class systems, it just has 3 at different degrees. And that works well for it, but the fact is this is not something that works with a class system. This is something that works with a concept system.
Cypher's good for a lot of other things, but this is not one of them.
Mm-hmm. And the reason I'm bringing this kind of thing up is because I want to also drill home the fact that contrary to popular belief, you cannot use any game for any setting.
There's no such thing as a one-size-fits-all system.
Well, there is, but in order for there to be that one-size-fits-all, it has to do so much that you may as well break out your old TI-83. Looking at you, GURPS.
Or do so little that you might as well just make your own.
Yeah, GURPS and Hero are one end of the extreme, and the other end of the extreme is every story game I've played in the last 20 years.
Exactly. Ultimately, if you're going to find the balance between gameplay and narrative, and it's going to depend on the setting you've created and the goals that you have in mind for bringing fun to your groups. Mm-hmm. And as we've established, this is a more narrativist type of setting because of how open the society and the system is. And there is no tabletop system out there that can one size fits all in a way that seems to be a good fit. As we pointed out, GURPS or even some of the more narrativist systems, they can do it. It's just it's not going to be very satisfying.
Yeah. Now with that, like I said, next week we will be talking about Garo, and which will be a perfect excuse for me to talk about how awesome every single fight scene in that show is.
Oh man.
And I can guarantee you that we will be able to talk about it for longer than 99.9 seconds. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra. I am your gaming monk, and join the